Hi, I'm Mark Besonen, and I'm the director of the Student Workshop for International Coastal and Marine Management. It's also known as the SWIM program. We're based at Hart Research Institute for Gulf of Mexico Studies at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. And this is one of several interviews that we're conducting for the SWIM 2021 program in order to give the students a little bit of a trinational perspective about reef management around the Gulf of Mexico. And so our guest today is not necessarily a specialist on reefs themselves, but he's an absolute master at report cards, environmental report cards, and the whole report card process. And so this perspective will be super helpful as the SWIM 2021 program attempts to put together a preliminary environmental report card for Alacranes Reef. And I forgot to mention his name, but Heath Kelsey is our guest today. So welcome, Heath. And I'm wondering if you can briefly give us a little background about yourself before we jump into our 5 questions for you.
Sure. Thanks, Mark, and happy to be part of this. It sounds like a great workshop, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. As Mark said, my name is Heath Kelsey. I work at the Integration and Application Network at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. And we specialize in science communication and science synthesis. So environmental report cards are a big part of that. My background is in public health, actually. So I have a PhD in environmental health science, water quality and bacterial water quality things. And I was a statistical ecosystem modeler for NOAA for a few years, and then became involved at the University of Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay report card in 2009. And I've been working with the university on different environmental report cards and now socio-environmental report cards ever since. So that's my background. I've got, whatever it is, 12 years now of working on different environmental and socio-environmental report cards.
All right, fantastic. No, just you could be a phenomenal help for sure as we're going through the process. So I'll start off with a question. Heath, could you briefly describe what an environmental report card is, or just a report card, socioeconomic? Is it like a technical report or a journal article or something like that? How would you describe an environmental report card?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question, and it's one of the first things that we talk about when we start talking about this subject with anyone, is that no one knows what these things are. It's not a technical report, but it's built on a lot of technical information. So it's we call it a synthesis product of a lot of different technical information, data, and analysis. So what it is, it's meant to distill the main messages that are coming out from a large body of science, a large body of research, and monitoring data and things like that. And it was born out of the need to make sense of all of these different data sets that were, maybe telling us slightly different things. And there was no product that could really put everything together and say, okay, overall, how are we doing with ecosystem restoration in this area? So that's what it's meant to do. It's built on a lot of technical information, data, and analysis, but it is very synthetic. It presents just the main messages that all of these things are trying to tell us.
Okay, fantastic. So given that, then, can you tell us who is the target audience for these report cards?
Yeah, the target audience is usually not other scientists. That's what your academic papers are for, and journal articles and things like that, or seminars and things. These report cards are generally targeted towards more general audiences, and people like policymakers and the general public, people that don't necessarily need or want the details about what's going on with each data set and the nuances and variability that happen. They want to know that main message. How are we doing? How is this place doing for ecosystem health or socioeconomic health, socio-environmental health, sorry. So it is not targeted towards other scientists. there are products within there that can be very useful for other scientists, including some of the illustrations and things like that, which are very helpful in communicating some of the key processes and things that are happening at a particular place. And those are generally targeted towards more general audiences, like I said, but they can be really useful for the scientists as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and it's interesting to hear the comment that the target audience isn't necessarily, a fellow scientist. So that brings up another question. When a scientist sees a graphical report card like this, and it's just a few pages long, some of them might get the impression that's kind of dumbed down science. And do you think that's a fair assessment to just call it dumbed down science, or is it just a different type? Or
yeah, that's we don't like to call it dumbed down science. We don't think they are. These report cards are not dumbed down science. And in fact, they're really hard to do. It's really difficult to take these different data sets and make sense of those things and distill the main messages that are coming out of there. We prefer to think of it more as that distillation of the science, not a dumbed down science, but what are those key messages that the science in this area is trying to tell us, is trying to say. And that's not something you often get from just looking at a bunch of journal articles and things. You kind of have to form a mental picture in your head about how things are. And this is meant to be that distillation. So we have a saying that we don't want to dumb down the science, we want to raise the bar. So we want to educate people a little bit about some of the science that's behind these things. Now, inevitably though, there is going to be a bit of the information that's in the rest of the detailed science and data that's lost. Some of the variability and some of the nuance is not presented here. It's not lost completely. I shouldn't say it's lost, but it's not presented because that is not something that the target audience is interested in, is prepared to necessarily understand or take in, and it's not part of what they really need.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So let me go on to my fourth question for you. And so if we think of a report card, sort of representing a snapshot in time of the state of a system, then how could they be used over the long term?
Yeah, that's another really good question. You're right. One report card is a snapshot in time of that one particular place at that one particular, over that period of data that you're looking at. But there are a lot of different ways that you can use this to track progress over time. One, if you have a data set that goes back several years, or in some of our cases, we can go back decades, we're very consistent data sets. We can use the report card to track overall progress towards achieving our goals since that time. So we can look backwards and then we can track forwards. So if we reproduce this report card and scores over time, every year or every few years, we can track progress towards meeting our targets, our goals. One of the things that I find really important and interesting about the report card itself is that every one of the indicators that you're looking at has to have a target that you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. So for water quality, say, you want to have a dissolved oxygen target. What makes a really good score for water quality? For coral reef ecosystems, coral cover, or mortality, or any other kind of coral reef ecosystem metrics. For each one of those things, what are you trying to achieve? And you put all those things together, and then suddenly you have a vision for what you see a future ecosystem looking like. This is what we're trying to achieve overall. And it's really a powerful thing because that's often never been done. And then as you progress and implement, hopefully, good management strategies and policies and things, you can start to see the effects of those things over time. So we do think that these ecosystem report cards and socio-environmental report cards are great at tracking progress towards achieving particular targets.
Okay, fantastic. So I have one more question for you, Heath. And I'm wondering if you can tell us about one of the most successful report card efforts that you've either participated in directly or observed elsewhere with somebody else having developed it.
Yeah, I think they're all like children, you know, that you can't pick a favorite, I guess. But if I had to choose some that were kind of instrumental in thinking and changing the way we think about things, the first one was probably the Mississippi River report card, which we worked on with the Nature Conservancy and others, that was released in 2015. And that really changed the way that we thought about the types of indicators that we could include in an environmental report card, to include the socio and environmental things together. So in that report card, we had ecosystem health, of course, but we also had flood control and risk reduction. Transportation is a really big deal in the Mississippi River system. Water supply, economy of the whole region, which is largely based on or made possible by that river system. And then recreation is also a big social and cultural kind of thing in the whole of the basin. That was the first report card effort that we had that really looked at those this holistic way of the entire system. And so that was a multi-year effort, and was difficult to do, but we learned a whole lot doing it. And I think the result was really, really good, and kind of was a milestone for us in changing the way we think about things. And of course, the other favorite that I have, I shouldn't say they're favorites, my children will be angry with me, but the other one that I really I think about when I think about advances in report cards are the series of status reports that we worked on with NOAA for the coral reef ecosystems that they have jurisdiction over. And I think that one was a really key project to think about because of the scale of it. I mean, I was really taken aback when I started to understand the number of places and the global footprint that NOAA has in managing coral reef ecosystems. It's huge. It goes from Guam and Saipan in the Western Pacific, scattered remote island areas and remote reefs in the South Pacific, Hawaii, and then you've got on the Atlantic side, you've got Florida, the flower garden banks in the Gulf of Mexico, and reefs in the Caribbean. So it was a huge footprint. And not only was it a huge footprint, but NOAA monitors all of these things very consistently. It's not perfect consistency, but it's really close. And so you can start to put together almost a global picture of how coral reef ecosystems are doing. And that was, I think, a really key project for us. And I'm really proud of that one. We just finished, well, in early 2020, we released the national status report that integrated the results of all of these different jurisdictional reports into a national picture. And we could say something finally about how are the coral reef ecosystems doing in the US. So I thought that was a really powerful one.
So Heath, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your wisdom and experience with the SWIM 2021 program.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sure your workshop's going to be a whole lot of fun, and it will be great. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about this. I love talking report cards.
Okay.